Damn, you guys are really particular over here. It's cool.
Obsessing with detail, sneakers episode.
What's up? My name is Jeff Staple. I'm a designer and a storyteller. And 20 years ago, I made sneakerheads lose their mind.
There's a footwear frenzy going on in the city right now, a special sneaker made just for New York.
So today, we're gonna be talking about these right here. This is the Nike SB OG Pigeon Dunk. We're gonna talk about what goes into a collaboration, how I was able to work with Nike on these, and why this shoe is now worth more today than it's ever been in history. This is obsession to detail. First, let's talk about collabs, and then we'll get into the design details. Back in my day, 20, 30 years ago, companies, big brands, such as Nike or Jordan or Apple or Microsoft or Red Bull, were not versed in calling up individual creators and doing projects with them, AKA collaborating with them. I was probably one of the first people that had the honor of being able to work and collab with a company. And so we would come together, and it was really the first time that big brands were allowing individual people into their headquarters, learning their trade secrets, getting behind the scenes of what was going on, so that that individual, whether it's an influencer, a key opinion leader, or a designer, could then influence what they were doing on a big scale. And this was the birthplace of collaboration. Now let's talk about how the Nike SB OG Pigeon Dunk was born. At the time, Nike, one of their most popular shoes was this shoe, which is called the Dunk. It's a 30, 40-year-old basketball shoe, and they were having an anniversary year coming up. So my friend at Nike calls me, and he's like, Jeff, we have an anniversary year coming up for this sneaker. It's the Dunk, which is one of my favorite shoes. And we want to create a dunk that is dedicated to New York City. Would you be interested in designing this? And I'm like, hold the phone, please hold. And I'm like, wait a second, design a dunk with Nike dedicated to New York City? Yes, we will take that job. And the brief was very simple. And this is the beautiful thing about working with Nike is their briefs were like, yeah, just make it dedicated to New York and be authentic. So my team and I went away and we started thinking about different ideas. My brand is 6 years old. It's called Staple, but we don't yet have a mascot for the brand. And I've wanted a mascot for a long time. I've always loved Ralph Lauren and the polo horse, Lacoste and the alligator, Mark Echo and the rhino. I just loved animals as mascots and logos. So we were trying to develop a logo for Staple and release one, and we were tinkering with this idea of a pigeon. But I was getting a lot of pushback from my teammates. I wanted the pigeon, but they were like, Jeff, pigeons are flying rats and vermin. Nobody would ever want to represent themselves with a pigeon. And I was like, I don't know, I think there's something to this. And we're sort of having internal debates about this, right? So then comes the phone call with Nike, right? You know, all my team is like, yo, what if we did the Empire State Building dunk? Or what if we did the Statue of Liberty dunk? Or the New York City subway dunk? And I'm like, guys, what if we did the pigeon dunk? And they're like, stop with the pigeon. Nobody wants to wear a pigeon on their foot. Pigeons are whack. And I'm like, no, hear me out, think about it. So I try to be collaborative, but since I am the boss and the founder, eventually I put my foot down, no pun intended. And I was like, no, let's actually mock up what this sneaker would look like manifested as a pigeon. Gray uppers, pink feet like all pigeons have. And then just to hammer it home, we embroider the bird on the heel. So we mock this up, and we show it to Nike. We go to Beaverton and we present the idea, and all the board members, all these old white guys in the boardroom that live in Oregon, 2 hours outside of Portland, are like, we said a New York City dunk. Did you not hear the brief? I'm like, yeah, pigeons, New York City. And they're like, we don't get it. And I said, if you got it, I failed at my job. You guys live in Oregon. You're not supposed to get it. I want to create a shoe that's not for the bridge and tunnel crowd, not for the person who watches Sex and the City and thinks they know New York City.
You just don't get it.
I want to create a New York City dunk for New Yorkers so that when a New Yorker looks at it, they immediately understand what I was talking about. And thankfully, Nike was like, okay, we don't get it, but we trust you that a pigeon dunk will represent New York City. And I'm like, yes. And half of it is storytelling, right? Like whenever I was out and about in New York and doing my thing and getting, my hustle on, I would see pigeons everywhere. And I really felt like, you get it, pigeons. Everyone hates on you, but you keep surviving and you keep eating. And I was like, I need to think like that. I wanted to be like the pigeon and just in my own way, take over New York City, but also take over every city in the world. Let's actually take a look at some of the sketches that I did preliminarily to design this shoe. So here's how it all begins. So as you can see, there's all these different views of the shoe that you have to account for. This is called the lateral view. The other side, which would be this side, as most people would call it the inside of the shoe, is called the medial view. And most shoes are symmetrical, right? They look exactly the same from the inside and the outside, but you don't have to do it that way. So it's something to consider when you're creating a shoe, what the outside looks like, what the inside looks like. I'll tell you another term that I am very proud to own and have coined. No one's heard this term before. It's called the jean lay. Okay, the jean lay is the view of the shoe when you're wearing jeans, and the jeans are sort of like sitting on top of your shoe, and that view that you have of the jeans laying on top of the shoe and what's exposed, I call it the jean lay. I remember people at Nike were like, that's genius that you call that the jean lay, because that ultimately makes or breaks a shoe. You put a pair of shoes on and you look down, it doesn't matter how it looks from the side or the inside or the bottom, it's all how you perceive it from the bird's eye view, right? So this is the jean lay. So you gotta account for that too. Obviously we, at the same time, were perfecting what the pigeon would look like also. So this is a hand-drawn pigeon, but we eventually digitized the pigeon. So, we had to figure out what the pigeon was gonna look like. Again, think about which variation of pigeon. Did we want a brown pigeon, a purple pigeon? Did we want the gray pigeon? So we decided that because when you're in New York, this is the pigeon that you're most often going to see. We wanted this to exemplify what all of these colors were gonna be. So you can see how these different shades of black, gray, light gray, pigeons often have this little hit of white. That we actually turned into the swoosh. So the swoosh is white because of where it sits on the pigeon wing typically. And then always, the feet are pink. So you go to the bottom of the shoe, it's always pink on the bottom as well. And then deciding where the pigeon goes is also key. This is where graphic design actually comes to play. I see a lot of other shoes where like they'll put shit here, they'll put it here, they'll put it here in like weird places. But you gotta think about a shoe also as like a magazine sometimes. Like you're laying out these images and text and stuff, So like, we felt like there was a really nice space here. And to be honest, nowadays, you'll see a lot of shoes putting logos here on the back heel. But back then, we were probably the first, if not the first 3 shoes that ever put a logo on the back heel like this. So utilizing this negative space that we turned into a positive was a very early onset thing that we did. Now, as you can see here, you've got cross sections of shoes that have like padded collars. This is the internals of the shoe. You have Zoom Air, which is Nike's proprietary technology. You've got the foam. This is the part where the collaboration happens. So I'm not a technical engineer. I'm not a footwear 3D designer. But this is the fun part where you actually sit down with Nike and they're telling you about Zoom Air bags and they're telling you about compression and like stability. And so when they do this, I'm the one that's like, okay, what if the entire inside was also pigeon pink? I think there was a version of this we did where the pink actually bled to the outside, but I wanted to keep the pop on the inside of the shoe. Again, because in my head, I wanted it to be a very wearable shoe. And I knew if I made an entirely pink shoe in 2003, it would have fell on deaf ears, So these are a lot of the considerations that I was going through as I was designing the shoe. So a couple of other details about the shoe that make it really unique. Number one is you'll notice that the tongue, this is the tongue of the shoe that sits on the top. You'll notice this one is in particular very, very puffy, right? The shoe that you have at home is probably not like a pillow like it is here, right? So the reason why we did this is because this division of Nike that I was working with is called Nike SB. SB stands for skateboarding. So it's a division of Nike that actually addresses what skateboarders need. And if you think about the tricks that a skateboarder does, like for instance, a kickflip or an ollie, they're oftentimes doing moves like this where the skate wooden deck is actually hitting the top of their foot. So if they're wearing a sneaker that just has a very thin piece of leather as the tongue, their foot's gonna get destroyed. This pillow on the top of their foot actually protects their foot from the thrashings of the skateboard. So this is a real user-specific case, but it's also an aesthetic look that in that early 2000s to 2010, having the puffy tongue sort of separated you from the sheep, if you will. It showed that you knew what was going on in underground skate culture. So I really love this detail. The other detail that I added that nowadays is again very, very common, but I think back then was more rare, is the idea that you may want to change your laces to match your outfit. This goes back to the jean lay that I was talking about. If you're wearing black jeans, you may want a slightly darker shade at the top. So for the first time ever, we added separate laces right in the bag. So you could switch out to the gray lace and then you could have a much darker look, or you could put the white ones on and keep it really fresh. So this was a cool thing that we were able to do with Nike. Another feature that I want to point out that I really love about the shoe is actually only seen on the inside. So if I pull out what's known as the footbed or the sock liner, that's the bottom of your inside of your shoe. So this is the foot liner. If you flip it over, you'll see there's a lot going on in this one that is not in other shoes. So this is Zoom Air. Nike was really famous for showing visible air, that big clear air bubble that you see on like the Air Max and some Air Jordans where you see a full visible air sole. It's a very thick bubble of air and that offers a lot of cushioning. The problem when you get a lot of cushioning is you lack stability. They sort of are on a seesaw. The more cushioning you get, the less stability you get. If you think about it, if you stood on a pillow, very comfortable, but if I pushed you side to side, you would have no stability, right? So that's the issue when you have a big airbag. So when you're skateboarding, you don't want a big airbag because when you land, you don't want to be like standing on a pillow. So what they developed was Zoom Air. This is called Zoom Air. It is a thinner piece of air, offers almost the same amount of cushioning, but way more stability. And it's actually embedded into the sock liner so that you can see it doesn't protrude up. It's not like you're standing on a pillow. It's just a nice soft piece of cushion for when you land those skate tricks. And then they also have another piece of cushioning in the forefront because some people land on their toes, some people land on their heels. So even just in this sock liner, which is usually a piece of trash rubber that just like, you know, people throw out. There's a lot of tech that even goes into just this little piece here. One other detail that I really love is this use of lasering technology. So if you look here, you'll see our logo has been lasered into the heel of this shoe. Now, these shoes were released only in 5 stores in New York City. Our store, Reed Space, being one of the stores that it was released in. I wanted a way to delineate between whether you got the shoe at the other 4 stores or whether you got the shoe at my store. But so what we did was we lasered the staple logo onto this shoe, and you could see it's a beautiful effect here that you really wouldn't be able to get if you printed it or if you embroidered it. And this is also not an emboss too. It is actually a lasering at a specific laser intensity so that it offered an engraving effect, but it didn't burn through the shoe. And it also will never wear off. Whereas if you do something with printing, it could eventually wear off. So really love this little detail with the lasering. And it's a nod to the navigation pack that we did with a lot of lasering on it as well. Even though, you know, as a designer, you like to Monday morning quarterback and, you know, second guess yourself. This, I have to say, is a near perfect design. Okay, fakes. Anytime you make something that's highly desirable, people are gonna bootleg it, they're gonna fake it immediately. And why not? I'm all in support of that, to be honest. I'm not one of those designers that is super anti-bootlegging. I think imitation is the highest form of flattery. So if they're making imitations of your stuff, you're doing something right. If you've made something and no one makes a fake of it, you might be doing something wrong, actually. The bootleggers now are so good at replicating a shoe that it is very difficult to just look at the shoe itself and know that it is a fake or whether it is real. The one thing that bootleg factories cannot replicate is the exact same adhesions and glues that the real factories make. And think about it, if you're a bootlegger, you don't have the same faculties and the same technologies that a big company has. If you need to glue this piece to this piece, you're gonna find the cheapest glue you can find, slap it on, make sure it sticks, and then just go on with it and make the most amount of money you can. You're not gonna invest in the best adhesive. You're not gonna invest in the environmentally friendly adhesive, right? You're just gonna find the shittiest Elmer's glue and just slap it on. Each glue has a certain smell. Go to your Foot Locker, open 3 Nike boxes, and once you smell that, you'll get that smell, and then you open another box and then it smells different. That's the fake one. It's the adhesive smell is off. The second way to spot a fake actually has nothing to do with the shoe. What you need to do, you need to put yourself into the mindset of a bootlegger, right? I'm a bootlegger. I have spent 90% of my time making sure this shit is imperceivably different from a real one, right? Okay, I've got every stitch, every leather, everything is exactly the same. Now it's time for the box. The box is actually where you can spot a fake. No bootlegger is gonna now spend an equal amount of time making sure that this typeface is kerned properly. Do you know what kerning is? Kerning is the distance between letters, tracking the distance between lines, this label, all of these fonts, all of these lines. Bootleggers aren't gonna care about this, they care about this. So their investment time into making the box perfect is 0 to 1%. So you're always gonna find, for example, when you open this box, you'll see that what we added was this topography grid line inside. 9 times out of 10, if you see a bootleg, they're not gonna bother with this. They're thinking, who's looking inside the box to see if these lines are right? And in fact, a lot of times, bootleggers, they'll be basing their bootleg off of the shoe. They might not even possess the box. I've noticed this as well for luxury brands, whether it's Prada or Louis Vuitton or anything. The packaging, the dust bag, you know when you get a nice handbag and it comes in that cloth bag, that typeface, the way they stamp the gold in there, that's where you could tell that something's off about this product. So 2 ways, adhesive, smell the shoe, and what does the packaging look like? That's how you can spot fakes. So now you know what goes into a collaboration, what goes into a seemingly simple design. And then it was time to actually launch the shoe, and you're never gonna believe what happens next.
This home video shows the scene outside the Reed Space Store on the Lower East Side yesterday when nearly 100 self-proclaimed sneakerheads got into a shoving match as they waited for the doors to open and the chance to buy one of only 20 pairs of pigeons. Limited edition, of course.
I'm walking from the train towards my store, and I see police barricades on both ends of the block. And I'm walking over and I'm like, shit, what's going on here? Of course, on the day I'm trying to sell a sneaker, some nitwit decides to make a bomb threat or do something stupid. What's going on here? NYPD is everywhere. And not just the NYPD cars, but the NYPD vans, like the trucks. So it's like, you know that something major is happening when those trucks show up. I keep walking towards the store, closer and closer. I see hundreds of people now. I still don't connect that they're there for this. All of a sudden, I hear NYPD sheriff on a megaphone. Who's responsible here? Who's in charge of this? He's standing in front of my store now. And I'm just like slowly waving my hand like, me? What's going on here? We're selling a sneaker. What's in the sneaker? I'm like, what's in the sneaker? Like drugs? What do you want me to say? You know, like we're selling a sneaker, that's it. So at this point, we're way delayed. We're like 3 hours delayed on opening, right? And I tell my security guy, let's hand out these raffle tickets and we'll try to create an orderly line, right? There's an amazing image in the New York Post the next day where you see my security guard holding up the raffle tickets and you kind of just see his arm because all these kids just started grappling him to try to get raffle tickets. So the raffle ticket idea did not work at that point. Everyone wanted to be number one. People were getting arrested. And then when the cops finally cleared the area and cleared the block for a moment, the crazy thing is you started seeing people dropping weapons out of their jackets because they didn't want to be arrested with the weapon. We saw baseball bats, we saw knives, we even saw a machete, like a full Crocodile Dundee machete sword. So people came equipped just in case shit went down, you know? And that was the release. It was insane. Now, it was actually embarrassing for me because you have to think about it. From my standpoint, I'm trying to collaborate with Nike to release this shoe in a meaningful way. And the way I saw it on that day, it was like blowing up in my face. I was losing control of the situation. So it wasn't a good look for me. Little did I know that 20 years later, it would be this thing that people are still talking about. And then the thing that really cemented it home was the next morning, the front page of the New York Post, sneaker frenzy, hot shoe, sparks ruckus, sneaker riot, Lower East Side rumble over Nikes. This was on the front page. It was the first time that a Nike shoe or a sneaker of any sort was on the front page of a New York City newspaper. Not in the best of lights, but as they say in the industry, there's no such thing as bad press. This was a game-changing moment. I think whether you love the shoe or you hate the shoe, whether you love sneaker culture or not, this day, February 22nd, 2005, is the day that sneaker culture was put on the global map. Everybody from this day forward knew that sneaker culture was no longer a subculture. It was a thing that was about to explode. And now, 20 years later, you can understand why this has become a billion-dollar industry onto itself. Many people say that started on this day. All this talk of collaboration has gotten my creative juices flowing. I feel like I want to like design something if that's cool with you. What do you think about designing a Daily Mail dunk?
Jeff, we only have 3 minutes.
Oh, I can do it in 3 minutes. Let's do it. I need some inspo. So we've got our dunk template here. Give me I need to see the logos and stuff. Give me something like, oh, nice. All right, so we got Daily Mail here. That's my inspo. Daily Mail is originally from the UK, right? Okay, so First of all, I think I remember the Daily Mail for their blue color. So we're gonna start with a blue. I think we should do a mostly blue upper, but I do like that there's blue and white. You know, white is the absence of color, but it actually is a color. So I'm gonna leave some bits of white here as well. Okay, so we're gonna make a Daily Mail dunk here. So here is blues. That feels like an actually pretty good color block. I think I'll hit this part as well. Okay, now I notice that on your website, whenever you do an exclusive, you actually have this pop of red, which is really nice, I think. So this will represent red for now, and we'll hit the swoosh in this red to represent the exclusive scoops that you guys always get. That is actually looking pretty good. We'll also do red laces to accentuate that as well. This is gonna be a fun shoe. And then I think we also want some reflectivity. You know, I think because I'm in the studio right now with all of these lights, I'm thinking about lights, camera, action, bright lights, right? So I've got the silver marker here. This is called the foxing. This layer is the area that actually holds down the laces. So this will be 3M reflective, okay? And then what I wanna do from this point now is represent where you came from, and that would be the Union Jack. So let's get a Union Jack on here. This is where the iconic pigeon was placed. I am going to do a terrible job of drawing the Union Jack. I'm gonna do it from memory. I'm gonna say it looks something like, yay? Hold on, I'm fixing it. Right? That's kind of it. Probably some blues in there. It's red. Hey, if I asked you Brits to draw an American flag, I don't think you'd be able to do it either, all right? So calm down. All right, and then the bottom needs something. Maybe we'll do, yeah, let's do yellow bottom. Ten seconds? All right, we're almost done. This feels pretty darn good. Let me just fill in the swoosh before pens have to go down. There you go. The Daily Mail dunk. Let me sign this. Done. You know, when you do anything, big or small, it doesn't matter. It is always about the minutia, the fine-tuned little elements that make up the entire big picture. In my 30-year career, one thing that I've learned, it's details that are the difference between making something good and making something timeless.
And the throaty coos of myriad pigeons.